Hi, Brandon.
Oh, there, Dirk.
Hey everybody.
Hi, Marcin.
Hello, hello.
Hey.
I'll turn on my camera, just waiting until we get started. To avoid the awkward, like, walking and like no one is speaking, and yeah, much better to like sit here in quiet silence.
You mean like this one?
So Marcin, I wasn't able to join the European time zone meeting today. Did it still happen?
It was cancelled again. I think we got into the point that doesn't make sense anymore to keep this meeting, keep the slot.
Okay.
If you want to drop it, I would say just drop a note inside the Slack and we can update
Yeah.
Both the HackMD doc and then the OCI calendar. Just drop Amy a message for the calendar.
Okay. I think it makes sense that from the new year we are going to just keep this meeting, and I will send a message on Slack about that.
Yeah, I think we'll probably drop the calendar invites until, we're not going to have it over Christmas or New Year's Day. So we'll have a couple of these already dropped in here. You check to see what she's already canceled because Amy tends to be pretty good about that stuff.
Okay, so this is basically the first topic in our agenda. We are going to meet January 8th, right? Not
I think
January.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just sneakily drop meetings and people will never notice. Just kidding.
So I think we can talk again about the use cases. Let's start. It's 5 minutes after 7. Can anybody share the screen? I promise next time I will share, but still into these issues I didn't solve. Yeah, I think it makes sense, as we agreed last time, to talk over organized use cases. So maybe we can go again use case by use case and talk about that anybody has better idea, or?
Yeah, I think Brandon also said it would be good to reduce them and take away redundancy, that sort of thing.
Yeah, a bunch of this just copy and paste right now. So as we go through them, we'll probably find that 3 different people all recommend the same thing.
Okay, sounds good. And let's start with the image author use cases. So I think the first one we already talked about, that we want to, at least this is a valid use case, that we want to apply compatibility without having to release and redistribute the image. The second one.
Is the second one and the fourth one effectively the same here?
The second one and the fourth one.
No, I think the fourth one is more about grouping. And the second one is more about, I want this artifact to be expressive. And the third one's about validation.
So is it fair to say here a single compatibility or something like that? Yes. Description. Something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point, because we've been talking about how the compatibility artifact would point to the image. And so this use case is saying, like, I want to point it to more than one image, and is that going to be supported?
Yeah, I think it's coming from Joe, and it's nice to have, but it's not must. But it's different than the second one.
Well, that's a good point. Do we want to have those terms that we have in all the OCI documents, like must, shall, maybe, like qualifiers of how, like do we basically want to rank these in terms of how important we think they are versus, oh, well, that would be nice, but it's not our primary goal?
Yeah, I think we should have that.
I would go, rather than ranking them, just have anybody that has a proposal just check off, I was able to implement X number of these things, and these are the ones I could do, these are the ones I couldn't do. And that way, when we're evaluating, we know that, hey, if we go with this option, we're going to miss out on these different scenarios. Are those important enough to us at that point?
Okay. So after all, it's a valid use case. So it's not the duplication of the second one, but I think the next one, or okay, oh, good idea to number all of those.
I know, we're like the third one and the fourth bullet that looks a little angry. No, numbers are good, are our friends.
I don't know how to make it start from 1. Does anyone know that?
I think what happens is when you have numbers earlier in the document, it start. Yeah, there you go.
We change. Oops. So Martin, you started with numbers. That's why.
Oh, my bad then.
No, you did a good precedent. Just. Okay, now the numbers are gone. Okay, I don't get it.
It's okay if they don't start at 1, as long as we can refer to them.
Okay. Yeah, I'll figure that out later. We can change the numbers. Okay.
Oh, great.
How did you do that?
You just right click and then renumber or something.
Okay.
Nummerierung neu starten for us Germans.
Thank you.
I understood none of that. The master of docs.
Okay, cool. Let's continue.
Okay, so next one is 5, and now it's 14. So so yeah, the 5 is, I think, about having it's coming from me. It's about having possibility to specify different set of requirements based on the hardware hardware requirements or other necessary, subjects. Because if we are doing cluster validation from artifact point of view, that you have a standalone artifact that without runtime image selection, and meaning you don't include the image spec at all, you have to somehow define different set of compatibilities for different CPUs, for example.
I think 5 a little bit is like a specific case of 2. 2 is saying I want the freedom to express many different types of compatibility, and then 5 is like this is a specific type of compatibility. So I don't know if we want, I don't know if we want to under 2 like kind of have sub bullets that have the specific cases, but I do think they're getting at the same thing.
I mean, when I was writing the tool, I meant basically that you can write any plugin you want in terms of subject. Like, so for example, I didn't think here about the conditions, the conditional side of the artifact language. It was like, for example, okay, you want check kernel modules, you have a freedom to express that. You want check kernel configuration, what kind of hardware is that, you can check that. However, I didn't mean conditional language specification.
But do you, like, what would be the example? Would an example be like for Intel CPUs, you require this?
Yeah, for example, for Intel CPU, you define different set of kernel boot arguments, and for CPU, for AMD CPU, you require a different one. A good example of that could be Intel IO MMU. For AMD, you have to have.
Yeah. But while your container can run on both, right? So it's not you are
Yes.
not limited. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we have this some kind of conditional validation in here, right?
Yeah, I wonder how this. What's yeah.
Yeah, I still think they kind of go together. The distinction is that it's conditional versus necessary, but in both cases, you're freely expressing a kind of compatibility, and whether it's conditional or necessary is just kind of a detail. I don't think it's a different point.
I think for me, I think it is, because you would say like, if Intel then this, if AMD then that. So you have different groups of requirements depending on one requirement. Right, so you have a switch basically. You say like, if I'm on a Skylake, I need this kernel boot argument. If I'm on an Intel or on an AMD, I need a different one. So kind of an optional, but with a qualifier, with a filter itself. To enter this set of requirements, you have a requirement that you need to fulfill.
It's still, though, expressing a hierarchy or a tree of needs. The difference is that you have like, okay, if Intel this versus like, if this, then yes. If this, then no. It's just when it's necessary, it's just like a, what do they call it? A stub, a root. One, it's not really much of a tree. I still think it's getting at the same thing. I mean, we can leave them as separate use cases, but they smell like the same thing to me.
I think it depends on how you look at the problem. If you are looking into graph implementation or so, you are completely right, Vanessa. I agree with that. But if you are looking in this, how to implement that stuff from the different point of view, it might be a little bit different.
But oh, sorry, go ahead, Martin. I didn't want to break you off.
I'm saying that we can simply remove 5. I'm okay to keep it as a sub point of 2. Just.
But what we could also do is, if let's say we can reference 2 different image compatibility artifacts. So like it's either this or that, and then within those, you can have like the AMD and the Intel case in 2 different compatibility artifacts, and you can have like both be picked. You know what I mean? Like, or having 2 images defined, one with the AMD, one with the Intel one, even though they reference the same layers or the same manifest.
Yeah, I understand. But I'm thinking having 2 different compatibility artifacts for the same image, not sure if you want to go that way. I could understand if we have one artifact that is covering multiple images because of similar requirements, but the other way around, I think it could cause, I don't know, some maintenance burden.
Yeah, I don't see him on the call, but in the document that I wrote, Joe brought this up as a question. Let me open that up because I think it's important. So I think there's different contexts where this applies, but he said multi-OS scenario should be taken into account too, because we've been talking about things in terms of a namespace, like open containers, something, something. And the question is, where does that next level of detail go where we really do want to break into, you may have very different artifacts for these different, whatever level of detail that we're talking about. But where is that going to be representative? Because right now we're sort of saying, oh, well, it should be within the artifact that you like, as an example, if you have a kind of graph thing, like if AMD do this, if this other thing do this, but maybe we don't want it within the artifact. We want it some level above that. I don't know, but it does seem like we'll have to decide like what are the most important features that define our possibly nested namespace for discovering things. And given that, I think we'll have an easier time answering a lot of these questions because we'll know where like the search starts outside the artifact and then where it starts within the artifact, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we should, my personal opinion on that is that we basically inside artifact itself, we don't distinguish operating systems because you have this in the image index where you specify platform and where you specify all the OS details and so on. So if you, for example, design artifacts for Linux, it points to a specific manifest, which can be what kind of operating system you can get from the index, right? Image index, and artifact is pointing to a specific manifest inside that index where you have already information about operating system and so on. So I don't think we need to think in terms of artifact about the operating system in the spec itself. However, we will have to think about operating systems in terms of plugins. If you design the plugin how to, for example, list kernel modules, you have to have give possibility to build on Windows, Linux, and other operating systems that are supported. However, you have to, as an author, you have to consider how those stuff are being discovered for the specific operating system itself. So I think we can leave it to image index and rely on this what we have in there, and we can keep the schema free of operating system details. That's my opinion.
But that means you have to write a new compatibility for every
Yes,
operating system architecture. Right? So because it's operating system dash architecture, if I remember correctly.
Operating system dash architecture.
So the platform identifier in the manifest is, or in the FAT manifest is operating system dash and then the architecture. It's not just the operating system.
Yes. But in most of the cases, maybe in that case, it makes sense to keep one artifact for multiple images, for instance, or so.
But it's not distribution, right? It's just Linux/AMD. So I think it's, I mean, what image is?
That's correct. It's Linux, and I don't know what the other
Windows.
identifier is for this, Windows or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess like
the architecture.
I think there are not a lot of images who can run both on Windows and Linux.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
Yeah, and
that's actually a question. If you're, sorry, go ahead.
So the manifest is not in single image, right? It's a list of images, a directory of images.
It's a manifest list that would hold the multi-platform, and there are some images today. Golang is the one that I always think of because it's just the basic language image, and they've got it for Windows and Linux because you can compile for both. There are also efforts to get like FreeBSD, WASI, WASM images out there, so there is stuff beyond just Linux.
Yeah, but it's within an image index and not a manifest, right? So it's like the identifier.
An image index is a manifest.
Okay, but the actual accumulation of layers and a config object, it's identified by a platform, like by an OS
Yeah,
tag.
Each platform would have its own independent platform-specific image, with its own manifest, but they'd all be listed within an index together. And so the tag will point to the top level index.
I have a question. How common is it? So let's say that you maintain an image that has many entries in that image index. Is it most common to generate that once? So you build all the different references in there at the same time and then push it? Or do you have a case where you have like two groups, one has expertise in Windows, I don't know, and the other has expertise in something else, and then you kind of put them together after the fact? Because that's sort of something we should consider for this use case. If we have very different communities that are maintaining the different underlying pieces and they need to put their final things in the same image index, for example, that's very different than if you're using like, you know, build kit, build X, and you're just like, oh yeah, just add this listing of, you know, different types to build with Kimu and then just push them all at the same time.
The answer is it depends, as always.
No, not that one.
Different groups do it different ways. There has historically been issues with, for example, the Docker official images getting updated for just one platform at a time and confusing everybody because, hey, the image that I was pulling yesterday supported all my platforms and I could run on my Raspberry Pi, and today I can't. And the answer is, well, wait a couple hours and it'll get fixed. That wasn't a great answer, and so they've reorchestrated stuff on their side, but yeah, it depends. People do it different ways.
Okay, so there is, though, we can recognize there is that case where they happen separately. Okay, that's what I was interested in.
Yeah, but you still have to generate a combined artifact image index or manifest.
You do. What happens though is that people will push one up that has just one, and then the next build finishes and they will go and see if there's one already there. They will update it with a second, and continuously through each one just adds one more entry to it and generates a new index, which is not great because it causes race conditions, but that is what they do.
Just choose different days of the week. No, I'm just kidding.
Make sure nothing finishes simultaneously and you're good.
So I'm thinking about that right now, that we have artifact pointing to specific image manifest, which is image manifest, not index manifest or so. And even if you build the same image for different architecture, then you might still have different compatibility. And yeah, I think maybe that would do.
I guess I'm curious, we're kind of talking like a two-way thing. We're saying like, okay, well, the artifact is pointing at the image, but now we're saying like, oh, but the image manifest is going to point you to the artifact. And I think at some point we do need to go back to actually like drawing out how these things work together, the directionality of things, because I think we keep kind of switching between them. Like, are we using the platform object or not? Those sorts of questions. But anyway, we're probably getting distracted in details, and we should continue moving through these use cases.
Yeah, we are going into. But one comment.
Well, I think the important part is to understand whether we want to have one compatibility artifact that covers multiple operating system, or whether we want to have a compatibility artifact for each operating system platform combination.
You are probably stuck having a different compatibility per platform specific image.
Yeah, that would be the best case, at least for me.
Well, so for generic,
So if you've got an image that can go to ARM and another image that goes to AMD, you would have two compatibilities because the compatibility that says how to run it on the ARM platform is not going to be the same as the one for the AMD platform.
Right, but if you have a high level requirement, like, I don't know, I need to have an IOMMU, then that can exist on any architecture and any view platform.
Personally, I think that this disadvantage is kind of okay to force. I mean, not to overcomplicate the architecture itself, as we start mixing the ways how you can use artifacts and the images itself. So I would vote for that we just force. If you have artifact, you have to point this to a specific image, even if requirements are the same for different architectures. That's my opinion on that.
The reason you'd want to go that direction is because the refer is only going to point back to a single digest, and you tend to want that, especially in something like this, you want that to be the platform-specific image you're pointing back to. And so if you have two refers pointing to two different images, maybe they could have the same underlying JSON file they're referencing underneath as one of the layers, but you would have two separate manifests because each one of those manifests have a different subject field in them, because each one will be pointing to a different manifest they're extending. Or in the other case, if you were putting it in like the image config, each one would have its own image config.
Okay.
But I think we can clarify all of that when we work on proposals and test some ideas and so on, right? Anyway, let's move forward. Let's go to the 6.
Are we deleting this one, number 5?
Yeah, yes, you can delete this one.
So the
Progress, it's slightly shorter. I'm just kidding.
I think it's kind of one. Some stuff from this, it's one that you can deliver the new compatibility scope to the customers without redistribute the image.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's generally saying I want to be able to update it without redistributing the image in a long-winded way.
I'm still processing what was just said. And like, Brandon, can you maybe, I will pull or push the subject thing in the chat. So maybe Dirk, if you could, can you open this link as well? Just for, if you go down a little bit to the example, is this how we envision this to look like? That here this one, that an manifest has a subject, and the subject is our to be created manifest artifact.
Other way around. The manifest that has a subject in it is the one that is extending your image theoretically. I use image loosely because you can always extend something other than image, but you would push your image up and then you'll push this manifest with a subject in it saying, I am extending this image. And so your layers inside of this thing might have common layers between multiple things you're pushing up, but you would have a different manifest for each thing you're pushing up to say, I'm extending this image, I'm extending a different image, because each one's going to have a different digest, because each one's going to have a different subject.
Okay. So I think I need an example for this. So
what you're probably having a challenge with is, okay, I push this up, how do I find it? Because I've got an image, and how do I find the subject for the image? Is that what you're?
Yeah, so our, like, the manifest type at the very top will be our to be like container compatibility plus JSON, something like the media type at the top.
Yeah,
Yeah.
scroll even
subject
farther
is going
down
to
to
be
guidelines
manifest.
for artifact usage. Here we go. And we've got a few examples in here that show that you can pass your media type and then a separate artifact type. And so you might have an artifact for whatever your compatibility is. And so this is still a OCI image manifest. It may or may not have a config. If it doesn't have a config, you have to put some kind of placeholder in there. So that's why we have the OCI empty descriptor in there. That's just an empty JSON body. And then whatever your artifact is would be one of the layers.
Are we decided on that though? Because
Okay.
I had remembered that I asked this specifically if our artifact if like the first level of things was going to be an image manifest that pointed to something, or if we were designing like a new structure. And I thought designing a new structure wasn't off the table, but the way you just described it, this is going to be an image manifest that points to an artifact, and the artifact is going to be the new thing.
I think we've got two different implementations we're looking at. And so the one that I'm looking at for image selection would not do this at all, because people doing image selection are not going to query and pull up artifacts pointing to the image to figure out which one they want to get. If you're looking at cluster provisioning or something other than that, at a higher level on the node setup, the image you want to find out how to set up the machines or pick nodes that you want to deploy this to, then maybe you could have something external.
But I'm thinking about this querying from runtime for image selection, the artifact itself, because there was this idea of attestation descriptor in the index. And I thought just to have some kind of references, because to the plugins that will help you with attestation. But maybe let's not go right now into this discussion, and I will keep it for the proposal itself, where I can explain everything clearly, and I need some time to think about that as well. And maybe we can continue with the points right now.
Yeah,
Cool.
Christian, is your question answered though? Or
Yeah. I think I understand now, at least more than before. So yeah, the subject thing is a little bit confusing to me, at least.
The subject is a backwards reference. So you're saying I extend this other image, and then we have an API that you can query and say, for this given image, tell me everything has a subject field that points to my image.
I bet you that came to be because folks were trying to figure out a different word than reference, because reference is used so many times, and then you came up with subject. Is that what happened?
We were using refer and refers, and people didn't like the plural of refer to be refers, and so we had to make another term.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
So number 5 again. It looks like this is a valid use case, and I don't see the application for that, at least now. Any comments to that?
Yeah, agreed.
The next one, I think it's kind of duplication of number 2.
Yeah, that sounds
Yep.
like must have, required, necessary, and then nice to have, not totally necessary. Different levels of expectation. Basically, when you're walking through that graph, if you decide a hard yes or no based on discovering something or not.
We're talking
Sorry,
about
I'm
the now.
assuming this is going to be a graph. It doesn't have to be.
We're talking about the now item number 5, right? As a content producer, I want to be able to make fine grained.
Oh, I was looking at 6 now.
6 now.
Because I think 5 was one of mine. I think it is a duplicate of probably 2.
Yeah, like, is that the one with the sub bullets? Oh yeah.
Is allowing users to pick, does that mean human users or their runtimes?
I thought about the runtime, but
For me, when I
here-
was writing it, I was always thinking runtimes.
Okay.
But potentially maybe a user would do something extra, but I was always thinking runtime.
So that's like saying if you're walking down like the arch spec tree, instead of going up to the most generic name for a particular kind, you want to actually associate a particular set of attributes or specifications for some niche thing that's like down toward the base of the tree.
Yep. So this one feels like a repeat of, I think, 2. And I say as the person who wrote it, so I don't mind it getting deleted.
I
Yeah, I
mean,
would add a
I
bullet
just
to it.
updated it too, right? So it wasn't before, but now it is. If you agree on that, then we could delete it, right?
I'm still looking at 5 though.
Yeah, for 5,
Good,
I would
5.
put like finer grained platform matching to finer grained platform definitions as a bullet under number 2. I think it's a good example for that. Matching finer grained platform definitions.
And maybe like shut me down if I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but like say we have all the compatibility artifacts referred to or as subject within an image index. You could just say, okay, give me all the possible compatibility artifacts for this image index, and then you pick the one that's best for you, and then it refers to a manifest, like the actual manifest. Is this how we envision this too? Because if we use subjects and we need to, as you said, Brandon, if we need to like find all the compatibility artifacts which are subject of the manifest we are looking at, then it's like an endless query, right? So do we externalize the list of platform objects by this?
If you
Maybe.
put your subject as pointing back to the top level index,
Yeah.
then all those people that are building their indexes, like slightly adjusting as time goes on, they add another platform to the list. They have to know to go back, find all those refers and change all those pointers to go to the new index they just pointed. And so if you were to point it to the
Yeah,
immutable
right.
images
That's
down
stupid.
below,
Yeah.
yeah, there are scenarios where that index could change, and when you do that, having refers point to that is a challenge. There's also users that will pull an image directly by digest, and they don't have a way to go up and find the index that points to them.
Yeah, true. Okay, I will defer this discussion to another
Yeah.
time.
Okay, so I think we can delete 5 down here now. We don't like bullet 5, do we? We just keep like.
I think the other 5 can also be deleted now.
Yes.
Yes, it
Just
got
keep,
number
just
5.
keep
So
killing number 5. Nobody likes number 5.
New rule, only 4 use cases per category.
This one too.
Yeah, looks like this
It was
one.
great when it was
Hmm.
6. Now it stinks.
Yeah, so this is must-have compatibility, basically, right?
Yeah.
As a content provider. Okay, this is new because this is different than as an image offered.
Isn't it the same content provider, image author?
No, I think it's a different role, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think we haven't
I
defined
wrote this,
content.
and
Yeah.
what I was thinking was somebody who got delete access to a repo could delete the new thing and change what gets executed. So I wanted an image author to be able to say, don't run this image unless you find the compatibility spec artifact.
If they can delete the compatibility spec, they can also change the index and they can change the image.
Well, it's signed.
Well,
They
probably.
cannot.
Wouldn't that logic be represented in like the tool that's like, I don't think you could prevent someone from separately pulling some image, but I think the tool that you're writing would be the layer that would be like, no, we're not going to interact with this image unless we consult the compatibility spec. But I don't think there's a way to enforce that outside of the tool, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what I was thinking of was just a tag in the manifest that the runtime could honor or not, but at least the content provider would have expressed it.
Like, we highly suggest that you check this first for your own
Yeah.
good or something like that. And then they can be like, yes, of course I will be rule abiding and listen. Or they could be like, nah, I don't need to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think as a hard requirement for runtime that wouldn't pass. Like if you want to block image running or pulling because there is no artifact compatibility, I guess we would have a hard time forcing this. If this is what you meant as well.
Yeah, no, I just want to be able to express it, and it's up to the runtime to honor it or not. Yeah.
Okay.
Could that also be a denial of service though? Someone copies just the image and not the rest of it, and so then that image can't be run. Or vice
Which is
versa,
a
deletes
feature.
the.
I think that's the point, right? So it's a feature that the image doesn't run if the compatibility hasn't been checked.
But like I'm thinking along the lines of, could that be some kind of denial of service where someone deletes that and then the image is no longer able to be used, even though it's a perfectly good image?
But to delete it, wouldn't they have to have like permission to push to that spot? So it would be like a very malicious thing for someone within an organization to do.
Or it's a poorly defined mirror.
I mean, it's exactly analogous to don't run an image, for an image to say don't execute me unless you find a signature. And you can't express that today. It's probably for a good reason. So maybe this isn't appropriate.
But I would think that it's a runtime configuration, right? You say like this runtime or this host only executes images with a compatibility artifact, and otherwise it will fail.
Yeah, I agree with that statement.
Yeah, if no one likes it, I'm fine with deleting it.
Well, to be honest, I like it because I think it will actually prevent errors in real life. Right? Because something wasn't updated to mirror the compatibility spec, and then you have just failures due to that.
Yeah, it kind of feels like extra metadata though to shove in there, because like there's no reason that anyone should generally you should check signatures and you should check compatibility before you run something. And to put a field that's like, yes, you still should do that people don't actually have to listen to is sort of like a waste of space. But having that ability to express it in the tool that's doing that, like, yes, we do not run anything without doing that check. That seems like the right place to express that, not to put a suggestion. Like arguably you don't have to have a compatibility spec ever. And so if you want to say that, like, yes, you should check compatibility, you're sort of implicitly saying that by having the compatibility spec to begin with.
I think it just says, I know I have a compatibility spec. So if you don't find one, then that's a problem.
I would
Exactly.
say just because it is a different use case and we haven't captured anywhere else, so it's worthwhile keeping it. I don't think that I would be implementing on my own, just because I feel like this is probably pushing a end user policy from the upstream image creator, and I feel like that's two different roles. But I still think it's worthwhile keeping it just to capture the content.
Yeah, let's keep that number 5.
Okay, so last week we discussed the domain architect one. I think we don't have to repeat that, right? So do we go to tool writer?
Did we? I think we didn't discuss domain architect, or I forgot something. Because the first use case is quite interesting. I would like to know the context of that.
So I think we talked about that. So this is basically that we as a group have a way to be approached for new input, right? So there's someone who knows about some new feature that we want to be that he wants to specify in the compatibility spec, and without having to learn everything, there is a process or a workflow or a way to contact us to implement it. I think that's what we talked about last time.
Right. Once you start talking about that, I recall that there was discussion about it. Yeah. Sorry, we can move forward.
Thank you for fixing the numbering. So what's the magic? So I pressed this one, that didn't change anything.
I had to find it too. There was a restart numbering button in there after I clicked through a couple things.
Like for you, it's now. Yeah, for you it's now.
Now it says new Neustart. Okay.
Go.
Didn't say that before. All right.
I was doing it before on others and it didn't want to, but I didn't have everything highlighted. So I'm
Okay,
fine
so
with
you need to
getting
mark the whole
information.
thing. Okay, got it. Learn something new today. Another thing new today.
Okay, then let's talk about tool writer.
But
sorry.
can I bring up this first point again, like this domain architect point? Like, do we expect to have like, let's say, one or multiple of those container compatibility or image compatibility artifacts, so that there is like a common one for maybe generic CPU stuff, and then there is a special one where we have like 2 artifacts describing the image as a whole? Say like the MPI image compatibility artifact is a distinct artifact and the CPU one is a distinct one, and in combination they describe the image?
To be honest, sorry, go ahead.
I don't think domain architect use cases here have to do with the spec specifically. I think these are more cultural outputs of our group. So we want to design, we want to set up structure in a way so that when there's a compatibility interest group created, they know the protocol that someone new can come and be like, I want to talk about MPI. I don't think domain architect I don't think there's implications about the specific kinds of compatibility artifacts that we're designing from that. That's just like, I'm a person with information about this domain and I want to be able to share it without thinking about the actual technical details of that.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay, then let's continue. Tool writer, right? I think we can move to this one. And I think that's another valid use case because we don't want to pull the image layer blobs because of compatibility. Okay, then we can move to the second one. Library, I think also makes sense to have this, that other can implement their own compatibility tools or whatever they need.
Now, having a library and having OCI maintain the library are 2 different things.
Yeah, I thought about the second one that we have an OCI that maintain the libraries itself. Then
Yeah, the design I was imagining would be something that OCI would maintain, but it would be more of a skeleton framework that you then had plugins for that other groups maintained. But I think having some kind of standardization that people can very easily develop their plugin for, I think that would be a good thing to have. And that doesn't prevent, someone from making their own custom tool out there. But I do think having the common set of libraries, command line tool, whatever, it'll probably have both, makes sense.
My mind immediately goes to, we need to make sure we have people that are maintaining any code that we add in here.
I mean, from my point of view, if for instance this is gonna be approved by TOB, that we have the specification and so on, from Huawei point of view, I would be able still to be a maintainer if everyone goes along with that, because from our point of view, it's not only to come up with the idea, write some tools and bye-bye. It's also about staying in this group if possible.
I can volunteer to be a maintainer as well.
Yep. As long as we have people to do it, that's the important part to keep in mind.
But is this really a use case? It's more like an outcome of the.
Yeah, it's an outcome, but I think the use case here for the tool writer is like, I want that tool. Like I want to either be able to make my own tools, like you're free to do that, or I want to be able to have an easy way to kind of plug in, I don't know, my knowledge. I guess it depends on how the tool is designed, but it could be as simple as, if you're, like for example, if we have this graph idea, if we implement that, it could be as simple as designing putting your metadata into a graph structure. So like graph ML, or I don't know, some other some flavor of XML or JSON or whatever, and then that goes into the tool. I do think I think it's a valid use case, because there are people out there that are going to be wanting to write tools, or be wanting to writing plugins that go into a tool.
Yeah, sounds good to me as well.
Where number 4 gets complicated is that we're putting the compatibility on the image, presumably. And we're looking at this as saying, I want to look at compatibility at a layer level, and that might be a layer below where you need to be, to reuse a term badly.
Yeah, I think this was mine. I would say this falls under the use case of like a user written custom tool that is not, I mean, I would be okay with deleting this and just saying that as a tool writer, I want to be able to use the compatibility specs in non-standard ways.
Sounds better. So Vanessa, could you reward that?
Oh yeah, I don't have the document open. I'm being lazy. Let me open it up.
You can also dictate, but I wasn't able to capture what the outcome was.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's talk about system runtime administrator then. We still have a few minutes left. The first one looks valid to me. It's about the having a tool, and that will help you validate stuff.
Question, how is this different from like the general use case? I want to be able to check compatibility against the environment. Like, why is the sysadmin case like special or different?
I guess it's not.
Which one are you
Right, so
looking at,
one is
Vanessa?
So way back at the beginning, there's a case that's like, I want to be able to use this compatibility specification to check, you know, if my image is compatible with the environment. And now we're saying like, I want, as a sysadmin, I want to do exactly the same thing. Like, and I'm wondering why they're different.
Yeah, to me, it is one person wants to be able to create the image that expresses this, and the other person wants to be able to consume that content that was expressed.
Gotcha. Okay, that's fair.
The second one is also valid to me. It's about the field that is like targeted for documentation.
Is the documentation the compatibility spec itself?
I think not, because for instance, sometimes maybe you need to know some details about the container itself, the documentation about application. So this is what I understand. It's not only about the container itself, but the application references. Is it right?
Wait, I don't understand this one. So this is saying like, I want to find like a link to external documentation in the compatibility spec.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I see.
So that would be like asking, let's say that you have a tool that consumes it, like, show me the documentation field or attribute or whatever, and that would like give you a URL if it exists or something like that. Maybe more generally, I think we just, maybe more generally, we want to say something like you want to be able to fetch a known field or attribute from a compatibility spec for inspection. And that could be a URL. It could be something else though, right? There's like a lot of interesting things that we might want to put in there. Like, I don't think you're going to design a tool that like opens the browser for you, right?
Who knows where we will get. But
yeah, I'm gonna be really bad.
but it could be useful if you have a documentation for compatibility itself as well, because sometimes sysadmins can question some configuration required by routers or whatever, why it's like that or this way. There might be some additional explanation required to understand the whole compatibility required for the application.
Yeah, we can just have like a OI command line. Why? And then it like the browser opens up and is like, let me tell you about routers.
Or you just
How
record.
about this one? Sorry.
No, I was making a joke, so go ahead, please.
No, I was asking whether this captures it.
Yeah, I think it's okay, at least to me.
Okay.
And then the third one, I'm not sure if I get that correctly.
Well, I think this one's cool. So I think this one is saying that like you want to be able to kind of keep provenance about what your users are actually running. So that kind of implies that there's a unique identifier somewhere and you're keeping track. I guess I'm not sure that that has to, well, it goes with a runtime configuration. I'm not sure that has to be paired explicitly with a compatibility spec. You can, I mean, there's other identifiers that you could keep track of. What do other folks, how do other folks reading this?
I'm reading this as I have a new tool to inspect on some host what kind of images are there to prepare runtime configuration to match the top X groups. I mean, for me, it's a completely different topic than compatibility. It's some additional tool that you could be used to create compatibility, but not compatibility itself.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's for me. So yeah, it's kind of like I want the report of all the images that are running in the cluster or something. Yeah, I guess you're right. You can kick it, even though it's not 5.
It may inform how we structure the spec itself. Right? If I'm building a cluster that's going to run these dozen apps, I want to know what I have to put in that cluster, what hardware I need.
I would just rephrase this. Take out a bunch of the detail around how you're going to use it and just say you want to be able to inspect the compatibility of existing containers within my cluster. So things that are already running rather than things you're going to try to run in the future.
But is it the case? Because I read this a little bit differently. It's not about inspecting compatibility that are running on the host, if I understand you, Brandon, correctly. It's about discovering what kind of containers I have there and then figure out the compatibility to match multiple containers from one compatibility group. Do I understand that correctly? It means I have one compatibility spec to describe a set of containers. And to know that, I have to discover first on the host what kind of containers are running in there and about the requirements. Maybe I'm going to...
No, I think like the idea is, let's say we have 5 different ways containers need to be configured, or the systems need to be configured to be ready for a certain set of containers. And by knowing, okay, I know like this 5 types of containers are going to be run with these requirements on the host, I can just prepare the system to be able to run those 5 types of containers or groups of containers, if you will. Like,
okay. So
yeah, I don't even see a compatibility spec in here. I think of this as like the container sniffer. I have a bunch of containers that are being used and I want summary metrics. I want to sniff them and see what do they look like? And then I can use that information to inform, I don't know, some future decision. But this doesn't seem related to a compatibility spec. It's sort of like a summary tool for existing containers that are somewhere.
A reporter,
So-
if you will.
So I
I
feel
don't
like
know,
there are
if
two
I'm-
things coming out of this. There's one that you want to be able to inspect all the running containers and find out each of their individual compatibilities. And there was something as saying for a given collection of compatibilities, make me a tool that will assemble all those and say, here is the commonality between a bunch of them. I think
Yeah.
we're saying that second part is probably getting out of scope of what we're trying to do here, but I still see value in the first part.
So I think the decision of a compatibility spec is outcome is yes or no, right? It's a Boolean outcome. Can I run this or can I not run it? And I think this one is actually talking about, okay, if you match these criteria, so quantitative dimensions, then you can run those images. It's a different way of looking at the same thing. Rather than
No.
like,
I think the idea is I capture all the compatibility artifacts that are were running the last 6 months, and then I try to figure out, as Brent says, I try to figure out, okay, give me the different versions of MPI, which like requirements which people were asking for, so that I can prepare images for this different use cases in the future.
I see, but in order for that to work, in order to be able to actually see those different variants of MPI that allowed you to get the container in the first place because it was compatible, that means that your system has to have support for them. Otherwise, the compatibility check, or the original compatibility check wouldn't have passed. But this
Yeah.
question is like, okay, I have 5 flavors of MPI on my system, and I want to use this compatibility metadata to figure out what people are actually using. And oh, there's a large percentage of people that are using this one, and there's only a tiny percentage of people that are using this one. So maybe my team is going to deprecate this less commonly used one based on what I discover.
Yes, but yes to everything you said. It's except the if you have nice to have features, like say this thing will run, and if you have a very specific or very, very targeted MPI configuration on the host, then it's nice to have. So it will still run, but you can capture those nice to have things and then optimize your configuration so that you catch this nice to have, or that you fulfill this nice to have requirements as well.
Yeah, one thing I'm having trouble figuring out is imagining a future where we have these compatibility specs. How common is it really going to be for containers that, you know, people are pulling for their cluster? What percentage of those are actually going to have them? Because it seems like something that big companies are going to maintain, but like when I build my containers with MPI and I push them to GitHub packages, probably not. So just something to think about.
No, I think we will make a TOPS problem and like if spec creates the compatibility artifact with nice to have definitions, then they are there, right? So for everyone, like if we make the packaging or the builder tools create those compatibility artifacts, then it's not up to I mean, it's optimistic nonetheless, but still it's less moonshot than what, you know, if everyone needs to do it themselves. Of course.
I think we can go back to this topic on January 8th because we are out of time.
Oh yeah, the one thing, yeah, sorry, I didn't look at the clock. The one thing that I had wanted to kind of narrow down. So I have my little dummy graph tool. I made it this weekend, and I wanted to start actually kind of hacking on a specific use case. I guess we didn't get to that, and we don't have time to briefly discuss it now. I could try to just come up with something on my own too, where we could kind of talk about it offline in Slack. But it would be nice to, before January 8th, to have something to actually start thinking about for the implementation stuff. Oh, good call there.
Yeah, I think because I saw your proposal and your ideas, Vanessa. So even if we are still not done with use cases, I'm working on my own as well. So maybe we can compare later. And even if you implement something, I think it would be useful. So.
Okay, then I will make something up then. It will be wrong, and that is okay.
Yeah,
and then we
okay.
will we'll increment on that.
Yeah, I also implement so we can maybe we can even sync on on Slack about some ideas or so. But
Yeah,
yeah, feel
that'd be
free.
great.
So the two administratives, next meeting, January 8th, we also have the GitHub repo access. So if people are holding off on submitting PRs and things like that, we can now do that.
Nice. Thank you, Amy and Brandon.
Amy and I went back and forth a lot of times trying to sort it out.
Like a sword fight. Just kidding.
Mostly me trying to guess what she was seeing on her side, because she has all the power and I have none of the visibility. So, all right, till next week. Or
Cool.
Yeah,
till the 8th.
alrighty. This was fun, everyone. I guess we'll
Yeah.
see chat in Slack if you want to kind of work between then, and otherwise, see you in 2024. Ah!
Happy holidays,
Have a
happy
nice
New
break,
Year.
everyone.
It's so far away.
I know. Okay. Bye,
Have a
everyone.
good
Bye
time.
bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.